Welcome to the Startup Leader Show, where we speak with leading startup founders and executives. I'm your host, Lisa Dreher. I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today, Dan Fine. Dan is a semi-retired part-time crypto coach and a long-time serial entrepreneur that has brought companies to great success over the years. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thanks, Lisa. It's been a while since I've seen you.
Oh my gosh, I know. Oh my gosh. It's wonderful to see you again and have
Yeah.
a chance to chat about this. Thank you so much for making time to be here today.
Well, congratulations too on your success. And, how long have we known each other? Has it been 15, 20 years?
Yeah, something
Something
like
like that?
that.
Okay. But yeah, and I've watched your career and I think it's just fantastic.
Oh,
Love
thanks
it.
so much. Yeah, I saw one of your comments on LinkedIn and I thought, oh yeah, a little bit too much flattery there.
All
Okay.
hearts
Well,
out.
yeah. So I want to learn a little bit more. Maybe you can give us a little bit of background on yourself and what you're up to today.
Yeah, you bet. So, wow, it's been a long road. I started working when I was just a teenager, but I went to New York to learn advertising and marketing, came to Seattle, started my own ad agency. And that morphed in 94 to a .com, 1994. So really early on, learned a lot, where there are no books on this stuff. So you had to just kind of bootstrap yourself up and learn how to do things, whether it be hosting or e-commerce or translating Japanese into HTML, and being able to figure all that out. I was fortunate enough to take that company, Find.com, public on NASDAQ, another huge learning experience because I couldn't at that time tell you the difference between the big board and NASDAQ, or at that time there was the American Stock Exchange. And I remember I was at a bar in Bethesda working on Marriott on a website for them. And I was reading the only book I could find on taking a company public. It was published by Ernst & Young. And it was like how to do an IPO for your company. And the guy next to me said, "Do you bring that book here to pick up women? Do you have another book like I just won the lottery? What now? I've inherited tens of millions, And it turned out that he worked for the SEC. And so we became friends and he gave me a lot of advice as we were going public, that things I just didn't, no one teaches you that, right? They don't teach you how to go public in business school or whatever. So anyways, I did that for a while. Then I created a platform for collaborative intelligent agents, or bots. And that was the year 2000, and did a patent on that. So a little ahead of our time. Bots, just started to come around now in both good and bad ways. And then started a number of other firms, including one focused on Microsoft Dynamics and doing ERP and CRM. And I got to tell you something, that is actually where I learned the most about business, because interacting deeply with over 1,000 companies and seeing their systems and process and their politics and learning kind of what works and what doesn't work. And you can almost walk into a company and get a feel right away of this is a successful company or not. But one of the things that also taught me was how resilient businesses are. You could have a lot of things screwed up in a company, and you've probably seen it in some of the companies you worked with, where you're like, how do they even make money? But they continue to make money and continue to stay alive. It's to everyone's shock. So then I wanted to move to Canada. So I bought a small company up in Vancouver and started to work up here as well as in the US, and eventually met a chief competitor up here, and we ended up selling to them. And part of the agreement was that I get to immigrate to Vancouver. So I live most of the time in Vancouver, part of the time in Edmonds, and then a smaller part of the time in Edmonds, Seattle, Washington, and a smaller part of the time in Portland, Oregon. And I retired at the end of the last year. It was, I'm only 63 now, but I wasn't quite prepared for it. I wanted to do it. And now I'm starting to feel it. Like the other day, I actually had a day where I opened up my Outlook and there was no new email. It was like, what? You're used to like, oh my gosh, I gotta, it's just like you're on a gerbil on a wheel, just trying to keep up with email. And it was like, I had no new emails. And it was like, that is what retirement's supposed to be, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So I did
Okay, so
retire.
yeah, okay, so tell me what a crypto coach is.
Yeah. So then, what happened is I was so fascinated back in the 90s with the internet and the web. And I love learning hard things that are, there's not a lot of information or it's complex or whatever. So we're in 2022 now, 2021, I started to dig into, and it was actually my daughter, who's a nurse, who kind of, got me going on this. Um, I started to figure out, okay, well, what's Bitcoin? And then, I met a guy at the dog park. That's where you make your best connections. And he started telling me about a crypto called Theta. And I was like, Theta, okay, so I got to go figure this out. And what Theta is it's a cryptocurrency, just quickly, that is going to augment, perhaps replace things like YouTube. And one of the co-founders of YouTube's interested in it and is an advisor to the company. But basically what they do is they let people, like my computer downstairs right now is a Theta server. So it's serving up video instead of going to a central content distributing network like YouTube or Facebook, where you have servers and you have, cache servers around the world. People just offer up free space and free bandwidth on their PCs and servers, and then you get paid in Theta for doing that. So instead of you having to, your next door neighbor is looking at a video, instead of going all the way down to San Jose to YouTube server, they might be getting it from mine. And it's kind of a BitTorrent thing. Anyway, so I started looking into that, and that kind of, how you get in the rabbit hole. And then it was like, okay, well, to understand this, I really have to understand blockchain. And then I got to understand hashing and halving and how you code and then how you build a blockchain, and then had to figure out, okay, well, what about NFTs, these non-fungible tokens? And I don't know if you know this or not, but my dog has a Facebook page. And for the last 7 years, he's been putting up dad joke memes. So we've got 1,000 memes. And in October, I caught COVID after being vaccinated. So we decided to take my isolation time, and we published 1,000 NFTs on OpenSea. So we learned how to mint them. It was all kind of experiment. And so what I'm doing now is twofold. I'm helping individuals understand kind of that world, whether you're a sculptor or an artist and you want to publish an NFT, or you're an investor and you want to invest in crypto, and then kind of helping companies also understand blockchain and how they can use blockchain, or how they could use cryptocurrency to either take and manage cryptocurrencies in their business. Wow. So it's just kind of fun, and I'm doing it part-time. I'm not, full-time dedicated to it, but I've got a couple engagements, and it's really interesting. It's definitely going to change the world, especially with Web3, and then how this all interacts with the metaverse, in terms of blockchain, Web3, metaverse, NFTs. NFTs right now, I'm sorry to keep just blabbing on, but I get excited about it. It's kind of crazy, it's this euphoria, and people are making some money and losing some money on NFTs. I think that's going to go away, and non-fungible tokens will actually become what useful tools that they're supposed to be, that will help people and help organizations and do the things that they're supposed to do, versus selling, apes or whatever. So
yeah. Well, I'm waiting for that. So maybe maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later, because yeah, this is all so clearly you're really not retired so much. So your email may not be full of 200 or 300 messages a day, but if you keep talking about this, it might be.
Well, I think that, what's great is I don't have a job to go to every day, right? And certainly I have a lot of things lined up that I need to do, and I still schedule my time, and I still dedicate a lot of time to learning. But I don't have that daily kind of thing. And the good and bad news of that, that's great, because like after this, I'm going to go hiking. But the bad news is that I don't get a paycheck every 2 weeks, which is kind of miss that, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, what are you going to do? Trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
So we invited you here to talk a little bit about some of your background and experiences. And I just want to start by talking about what have been your biggest keys to success during your career.
That's a great question, and something I think a lot about, especially when I have time on the trail and I'm hiking. And I think about, as I advise other people what to do. Um, the most important thing is you, Lisa. Just exactly what we've been like over 15 or 20 years. It is about building a network of trusted people that you like and respect, and staying in touch with them. And it's more than just using people for business, right? Some people are just you've met those people before. You're only useful for them if they can get a transaction out of you. And that's not what I'm talking about. And I'm talking about building those deep relationships with people that you will honor throughout your life. And you start to work with people not just as business contacts, but as friends and as relationships. And that is probably the key thing. And I learned that from a mentor of mine, an old boss of mine in New York, a guy named Don Peppers. And he was the marketing supervisor at the ad agency that I worked in. And then he went on to write The One-to-One Future, which was all with Dr. Martha Rogers. And it was all about how do you build, one-to-one relationships. Now, part of that was how to use technology to help assist with that. And the other thing I learned was Howard Stern, this guy, signed a $100 million contract with Sirius XM. But what I learned is that he actually keeps a customer relationship management or database of every person that's ever been on his show, the homeless people he brings in to an interview, all the advertisers and sponsors. And he's been doing that since day one, since he was at WDRQ in Detroit. Wow. And so he has built this huge database that he has at his fingertips. And that relationship management is really a key to his success. So, I think that's first and foremost, the foundation is having a network of trusted relationships that you can work with throughout your career in your life. Second thing is if you're going to start a company, I didn't learn this, and I didn't know this until Find.com. And a woman worked for me, and she approached me and said, I forget what titles she wanted, but she'd been going to a school for leadership, and she wanted to build the culture in the organization. And I had no clue at that time that you needed to do anything for that. I thought it just happened. You just made it a nice place to work and people would be happy. But I didn't understand kind of the whole envelope for what you have to do to build a great culture. And I finally got it right in, I think, the last company, after all those tries, because I do what they would say, you got to build a mission, a vision, set up your values, you got to live to your values. All that's good. And that worked. But if you really want to make it a super success, we did a thing called Arbinger. And Arbinger was something that I learned. It was funny because it was an old partner of mine who gave me a book on it called Leadership and Self-Deception. Sat on my nightstand for 6 months. I finally picked it up, read it. Wasn't a very hard book to read. I read it in a couple of days. And then I remember going to her and saying, wow, thank you. That book really made an impact on me. I mean, it really did. And I can see why you gave it to me. And she said, well, I haven't read it. I just thought you'd like it. And I'm like, you didn't read it? What the hell? And so anyways, then I had our whole family read it because it's beyond business. And then we adopted it at the company, and we'd have quarterly meetings and retreats where we'd invite spouses or better halves and even teenage children. And in some cases, we invited and paid for competitors to come. And wow. It's a really cool thing, because what it says is that your culture is really about treating people like people and not like objects. So, if you think about it, and I'll just give it like my wife. She's not my wife. Her name's Kim. She's a person, right? And, if you think of her as a wife, like what our wife's supposed to do, then she's an object. But if I think of her as a person and treat her like a person, that's different. So if you think about, we probably know people, some in politics, that you're an object to them, and how do you serve them? All they care about is themselves, and you're a tool to help them. Whereas, hey, how can I align my experience, skills to help you, Lisa, be successful? And I may or may not benefit out of that, but how do I align around making you successful? So when you think about your employees, they're not employees. It's Jeff. It's, Luna. It's whoever it is, right? And then if you think about your partners, it's not Microsoft. It's Joe. And what does Joe need to be successful? And you think about, the media, and you think about all those people as they're people, objects. So how can I help them, using my skills, become successful, and we can work together and align? And boy, that really just, and I didn't do it to, I did it because I really liked the concept. But what I didn't realize, and it just like everyone was amazed in our company, our turnover in employees and clients went like to nothing.
Wow.
People really wanted to work there and be treated like people. Clients really wanted
Imagine that.
Yeah. It was a game changer, and profits went through the roof because of it, because we didn't have so much churn in either our client base or employee base. It was so simple. It's a simple thing. Yeah.
Wow.
There's two other things, and is it okay if I continue with them?
Absolutely. I want to hear this.
Okay. There's two other things that I think are critical. One was strength finders. And this was kind of interesting because, I remember we read about it and we said, okay, let's take strength finders. And we went online and bought everyone, it's not expensive to do, to find out what their key strengths are. And the goal is like, how do you focus on people's strengths and not on their weaknesses? Right. And I used to think about, and I had that problem, which was, oh, that person's, really good over here, but they're weak here. So let's spend some time training them up on what they're weak.
Yeah.
And the fact is that you can only make minimal increments of improvement on their weaknesses, but you can make huge improvements on their strengths. And also, when people are weak, they on certain things or don't like doing certain things, it drains them. They don't want to do it. Right. And so they'll do everything to avoid it. They'll delay, they'll push it off, they'll make excuses. So we decided, we did the strength finders, and my partner, Scott, came to me after, we had done it and said, I'm going to be really angry if this is all we do with this, is just take the test. Right. If we don't use this, that's going to piss me off. And I was like, okay. So I started doing more research on that. And that's where we said, okay, let's take an Excel spreadsheet. Let's figure out where our strengths are. Where do we have, where are we missing those strengths? Let's reorganize the company based on people's strengths, and let's get them to be stronger in the things that they're good at. And we found out, like, for example, our financial person really hated making collection calls, and it reflected in she was really good at all the financial stuff, but the collection calls was something that she didn't like, picking up the phone and saying, hey, where's that check? And you could see it in our aging reports, right? Because it was not looking great. And when we were doing the reorganization, our marketing manager said, I don't mind making those calls. And it was like, really? And so we gave her that responsibility, and our collections went back to normal, under 30 days. It was just and it made the financial person feel better, because she felt drained and didn't even want to come to work on Monday to make those calls.
Yeah.
Pull that thorn right out of her foot, right? And that worked incredibly well. So kind of the last thing that I found as kind of a key pillar was this, I read a lot of business books. Everyone tells you, oh, this is my favorite business book, read Good to Great, read, Great to Fantastic. You can just keep going and going. And you read them and go, yeah, I want to do that. Yeah, right. I want to be that. Yeah, that's great. But there's no cookbook. There's no recipe or kind of book that tells you, here's the plan. And there is organizations called Scaling Up, and they came out of the Rockefeller methods or something like that, where Rockefeller had paid to start the foundation for this. But basically, scaling up is the cookbook. It's the recipes. It's the checklist on how you focus on process. You focus on people. You focus on cash. And you can't do all this stuff because you go and you do these strategic plans, and we're all sitting in a room. We write up on the white paper, and then the white paper gets rolled up. Nothing ever happens.
Mm-hmm.
What this does is say, look, you got to do these sprints. You got to prioritize. You got to have stand-up meetings. You need a scorecard to be able to, track that. And you need to delegate. And that was the other thing for me, was like, okay, I'm going to get you you're in charge of this. I don't care how you hit those goals, as long as it's legal and ethical. But that's your responsibility. And I'm not going to micromanage and tell you how to do it. And if you need help, we're here to help you. But here's your scorecard, and we're going to check in and see how you're doing. And when you gave the responsibility over someone and said, you're in charge, go get it, go do it, they loved it, and they would go do it. And then all of a sudden, the kind of gates open up on the organization, because you're not micromanaging everything. You're not decision making on everything and telling everyone what to do. You're letting people make their own paths and getting, as long as they go to the common goals that we all have, why not? And the book kind of sets up the formulas to go do that and how you prioritize those. So you're hitting the right people, meaning culture, organization, processes that you need, and systems, and your cash that you need to manage and grow the company. It was, yeah. And I kind of, all this stuff didn't even come together for me until, my 6th company.
If only you could have known on the first one, right?
Yeah, I'd have a lot less emails probably.
Well, it doesn't seem as though it's hurt you in the end, though. So
no, it was a great learning experience. And I'll tell you, I think that people like working in companies like that because, first of all, they're treated like a person and not an object. 2, they get responsibilities and get to make their own plans and use their heads to figure out how to get there. And then they all get rewarded, and the company is rewarded because you're making cash and growing, and it just makes a great environment. So that tied with our first point, which is how do you surround yourself with a treasured network of people? I think are the kind of the keys to making a successful organization. And it doesn't have to be a for-profit. It can be a nonprofit or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, amazing. So fantastic recommendations. Now, when you think about growing a business, a lot of times you'll run into roadblocks or you'll hit plateaus along the way. What have you found are the best ways to, I guess, work around the roadblocks, get over the roadblocks, whatever those things are, or work through those plateaus? What have you seen is really effective?
I'll tell you about some of the roadblocks. I mean, you're going to always hit them. And there's a couple of them that are really hard to deal with. One is that when you're in the moment, when you're in the, in building that company or working and growing that organization, nothing ever seems good enough. And you don't seem like you're making progress, and you don't feel like you've done well. And there's always issues. There's this issue and that issue, and it just frustrates you. And it isn't until you've, sold that company or done whatever you've done, and then you look back and go, wow, we did that. We doubled revenues for 7 years in a row. I mean, oh my gosh. Or, we took over that market. It's not until you get out of it. And so when you're in the moment and you're in the midst of the organization, it's when you have to realize that you're doing the best that you can. And you have to say, that's good. And I actually got that from an old book from the 70s called The Inner Game of Tennis, where this guy was a tennis instructor, but also kind of like a guru type of guy. And he would talk about when you go out and play tennis, when you're playing tennis, when you start the self-talk is when it's bad, where you're like, what's wrong with you? Why did you serve that way? Why can't you hit the ball better? You can't talk to yourself that way. You need to just serve the ball, let your body do the work and your mind just kind of do the work. And accept what happened. Is it okay? It's not okay. It's okay. We're going to serve again. We're going to play the game. And you don't beat yourself up and you don't congratulate yourself. You know how there's always that talking. I used to be in the shower and be like, God, dang, why didn't I finish that? I should have finished that presentation last night, And you're like,
Yep.
yeah, who am I talking to? Right. And it's in your brain because you're beating yourself up, and you shouldn't. Beating the other side up. So you just should say, you know what, we're doing the best we can, and I'm just going to keep going at this, and I'm fine. Right.
Yep.
So that, self-talk where you're beating yourself, stop doing that. The other thing is that if you're a CEO or you're the leader of the organization, it's pretty lonely, because if there are issues, and there always are, you can't really go spread the news in the company, right? Let's say
Right.
payroll's coming and you're short. That's not something employees want to hear.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Or you've got some other huge issue going on, a potential lawsuit or whatever. Those are not things you want to spread around the company. And truthfully, I didn't like to spread them around my family, because,
Yeah.
home, it's kind of like work is work. I'm going to come home, have a good time with the kids and my wife, and not worry about that over there and make them worry about it. So trying to find, a fellow CEO or a fellow leader that you can talk to confidentially, that they can, help you. Things are always going to happen, but, they can just, listen to you, and they feel the pain. They're going through it too.
Sure.
So that is kind of a major obstacle. The other one that I think was key was never, what we talked about in the beginning. Businesses are incredibly resilient. And even if the worst crap comes down, you're going to make it through, and it's probably going to be fine. I remember the day that we were going public with Find.com. And so, we're filed with the SEC. We got our date coming up. And then all of a sudden, our president decides to quit and take 9 people with him.
Oh, geez.
And you're like, what? We have
Yeah.
that now. It's going to really affect our offering. Where the heck did that come from? And I mean, as soon as he told me, and I don't get headaches very often, but I got this huge migraine and the stress, and I'm like, oh my, this is going to kill us. And it turned out it was just a minor blip. No one really even gave a freaking care. But
amazing.
I found out years ago. Yeah, it was just kind of like, what? And I found out years afterwards what happened was I had assigned the CFO, the COO's position, CFO and COO, and the president wanted that role, never said anything to me. So he had a chip on his shoulder, and that's when he quit. And he decided to be vindictive and do it at the worst possible time and take 9 people with him. Yeah. So it was kind of like, but did it affect the company and even the short or long term? Not really. And so companies are incredibly resilient. So when those bad things happen, it's just kind of like, yep, okay, let's bring it on. Let's just get over with it. We're going to keep moving forward.
Wow, what an amazing story. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I want to end with one last question, which is, if you were to make one prediction about the future of business or technology, what would that prediction be?
We're going to see a huge shift away from organizations that are run by CEOs and the corporations and stock offerings and venture capital. And you're going to see these DAOs, these distributed autonomous organizations, come up, where they'll be managed by a foundation, and the kind of shareholders will be the people that own the most cryptocurrency or tokens in them, and decisions will be made by voting through the computer system. So you're going to see some really, and what's cool about that is that we really won't be making decisions about the people that are running them. Because it might be a 16-year-old, it might be someone in a different country that, with a brilliant idea and a brilliant team. And so you see, and there'll be a lot of failures for sure, but we're going to see kind of a different structure as we go to Web3 and DAOs and distributed technology. It's going to change a lot of what we're looking at today.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, Dan, thank you so much for being here today. I don't want to end this session because you have so much great input. So we might have to have you on again in the future if you're willing and you have time
Yeah,
between
I got
hikes
time.
and cryptocurrency coaching.
Perfect. Lisa, so good to see you again. Thank you.
Great to see you too.